Hiring managers. What was something on someone's CV or resume that made you either immediately want to hire them or immediately reject them? Resumes are a go, no-go for whether I will look at you as a serious candidate. I'm not using them to determine who is the best candidate. If I'm going to consider you seriously, you need to make it easy for me to know if you can do the job you applied for. As such, resumes should be the following. Concise. The resume is a place to summarize your experience and qualifications, so keep it short. If you're 35 and you still have your high school extracurricular activities on your resume, it's time you trim the fat. If you have a 4-page CV, it's going in the bin. Orderly. All of the information should be organized clearly so I can look at it and know your qualifications. People read in an F pattern. As such, the most important info should be at the top with major bullet points down the left side. Honest. Don't post it if you didn't do it. I'm okay with stretching the truth, but if you say you were a QA engineer, you best be able to back that up with some knowledge. Professional. The CV answers the question, what have I done and what can I do? Not the question, who am I? As such, it should be factual, not charismatic. Use your cover letter to show your personality. Spell checked. Holy crap, spell check your work. Unless you're writing your CV in Notepad, spell check is automatic. If you're ignoring the red lines, then you aren't the kind of person I want working for me. Proofread. After you write it, put it down for a day and look at it the next. If you proofread something immediately after writing it, you will read what you think you wrote, not what you actually wrote. Things that should be towards the top. Your name and contact info, your experience, your education, your certifications. Things to put toward the bottom. Awards and recognition, skills. Consider dropping hobbies and interests. Duly noted. I'm gonna kill that interview as a babysitter. Story 2. When I was a hiring manager, IT or software development, lots of shortlisted experience, without any indication that the person was a contract employee. Many contractors work in contracts that are 6 to 9 months, and I get that. However, if your resume is just a long list of companies where you've worked at, each for less than a year, and it's not apparent these were contract positions, I'm probably going to assume that you're just buzzword padding your resume without any useful experience because most people can't get meaningful experience in a particular language or technology that quickly. I did contract work for 6 years. I know how it usually plays out in our local market. Here's one from the other side of the desk. At one point, I sent a resume to a local company who had reached out to me to see if I was interested in an opening. When I went in for the interview, the guy interviewing me seemed really grumpy and, frankly, hostile towards me. He directly contradicted a few of my answers to soft questions. Why are you looking for a job, etc. Side notes that will be important later. I brought a printed copy of my resume along, but when I came in, he already had a printout, so I didn't offer my copy. At the time, I had a list of Jack Handy, SNL quotes that would be randomly appended to my email signature. It's sad to think that a family can be torn apart by something as simple as a pack of wild dogs. Stuff like that. Whenever I sent an email, one of these would be picked from the list and added below my signature. We made it through the interview, and as I was getting ready to go, he said, "Can I be honest with you? Your resume is kind of a shambles, and there's some stuff on here that I find a little disturbing and really doesn't belong there. Before you give your resume to someone else, you should remove that." So this guy shoves his copy of my resume across the table at me and sticks his finger at it. It's a total mess. None of the formatting, every line starts with a right angle bracket, and at the bottom is a Jack Handy quote. I believe in making the world safe for our children, but not for our children's children because I don't think children should be having intimate relations. Turns out the guy is a total technophobe. Bad call for someone interviewing software developers. And his secretary had copied the contents of my resume and pasted it into the body of my email when she forwarded it to him. I had brought a nice printed copy of my resume and gave it to him. None of that alarming offensive content. He ended up extending an offer, but I was no longer interested. Story 3. I was an AV engineering team lead for a startup for a time. A couple of years ago, I was hiring to fill about 30 slots for a very basic AV tech position. I had about 20 applicants at the time, so if you were reasonably competent, you were in. I got one resume and cover letter through our website from a guy who I will henceforth refer to as the screw-up. Every third word in this thing was spelled incorrectly. Punctuation was optional and spacing was randomized. Thinking, this can't be real. I called one of the guy's references. Oh boy, did I ever get an earful from a grumpy business owner. The screw-up in question was so much of a screw-up that he was applying for positions in my area because he was effectively blacklisted from just about every job site and labor company in his hometown. A medium-sized U.S. city with a very, very large audio-visual job market. The reference told me that he told the screw-up not to hand his name or number out as a reference because the screw-up had caused more than $200,000 of damages to the reference's company's equipment the previous year. He went on to name, correctly and from memory, the other references that the screw-up likely listed in his resume. Friendly competition of the reference and told me that they would all say the same thing. So I called around, The screw-up is apparently quite the liability. We did not end up hiring the screw-up, but I made some new business friends in another city. We've since collaborated in a couple of larger conference gigs that hit their city first and then our city afterwards, so thanks, screw-up. Well, at least it was helpful in the end. Story 4. I work at an escape room. We once reviewed a resume that consisted of a webpage address protected by a password and 3 well-crafted riddles that we had to solve to get the password. We spent an hour doing it with 2 colleagues, and it included decrypting a code from a specific frame of Zodiac by David Fincher. It was simply amazing. Sadly, we weren't hiring at the time, and she had found another job when we started hiring again. David Fincher, not Lynch, my bad. Since I'm receiving a lot of answers, including pieces of advice on what we should have done, here's some important precisions. No, we couldn't have hired her on the whim. You can't create work for nothing in escape rooms. We have 6 rooms. We need 1 game master per room when it's running. That's all. Our building is full, we can't add other rooms, so we don't need to hire until someone leaves. No, we won't fire someone to hire that person. First, because we're living in a civilized country that doesn't allow people to get fired without any reason. Second, because firing someone that way isn't how you keep people motivated and invested. And our boss knows that. The fact that she knew how to create riddles doesn't mean she would have made a great hire anyway. We're already 13 and we all know how to make riddles. That's part of the job. We also all have other skills that contribute to that job. What made her application special is the way she made it, reflecting her motivation, not her skills, per se. No, we shouldn't have hired her to design a room. First, because we didn't have any room to design. Our building was full, and it was more than a year until we needed to create a room. Second, because we already have designers. Remember, we're 13, plus the bosses, and we all have the skills she had. Third, because designing a room is a 3 to 4 weeks job, not a full-time one. Fourth, because it requires other skills than simply creating riddles, and neither you nor I know if she had them. Fifth, because you simply don't hire a newbie to design your next $20,000 to $30,000 room that will be 1/6 of your company revenue for the next 3 to 6 years. That's absolutely nonsensical. To the people saying we're idiots for not having hired her, you know nothing. Story 5. Once I received a resume that had raid leader for WoW and top guild of a server. This was about 9 years ago. The other hiring managers laughed their bums off and said the guy's a joke and they all dismissed him. I asked the guy to come in for an interview and he did pretty well and I hired him. The reason I brought the guy in for an interview was because I'm an avid WoW player at the time and I know the crap raid leaders go through. Trying to get a large number of people together, coordinate resources and rewards, getting guides together and telling people to up their healing or DPS and not stand in fire. All done virtually via event and forum postings, meaning you never met these guild members in person. You need some great leadership skills and project management. Also at the time I was dealing with a lot of people off-site, so I thought this guy would be a good fit. 9 years later, I've left the company. The WoW guy I hired turned out to be great, especially in the last 9 years when corporations decided that working from home, virtual meetings is the way to cut costs. His skill set as a raid leader translated very well with remote project management and is now the manager of the hiring managers that laughed at his resume. This was at a Fortune 500 financial company. Story 6. This is one of my favorites. I work in an analytical field where programming and mathematical skills are pretty important. I had a candidate for a lead analyst position submit a 9-page resume, which was already a deal breaker. The last page was entirely dedicated to skills and attributes. The highlights were extremely beautiful, highly skilled in math, obviously. The candidate was an adjunct professor at a local tech school. They had a master's degree in statistics from a mid-level state university. So yes, they were qualified, but definitely not as remarkably qualified as they thought they were. The candidate did get an interview, believe it or not, but they weren't hired. Was it because she lied about the extremely beautiful part? The 9-page resume? 9 is not a prime number. Disqualified. Well, anyway, since you're already here, please don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you wouldn't miss out on any of my future uploads. Story 7. I'm not a hiring manager yet, but I've been involved with reviewing some resumes for my manager. Hire. Straightforward resume with no extra flair. Explains in detail specific examples of accomplishments. Instead of improved efficiency, you can say improved efficiency by 40% in a process, which is a lot more specific. Numbers matter. Get rid of your personal interest section. I would love to see it, but most won't. Employment is greater than school. School is greater than extracurricular. Be sure to include your special skills. Even putting Excel proficiency can help if you're a college student applying for your first job. Reject anything that looks like it was low effort. Vague bullet points. If a hiring manager has to ask about everything, then it's not a good resume. Badly formatted. Some hiring managers will throw it out. Too long. Hiring managers go through several hundred a day, so a 10-page resume will just hurt you. Story 8. I've hired several admin assistants over the years. These were all submitted for that general position and were immediately rejected. He wrote a full letter about what a great manager he is. For an entry-level position with zero management duties, the longest time in any job in 3 pages of a resume, 4 months. So many massage therapists and physical therapists with zero relevant work history. Wrote that they're an expert in MS Word, submitted a Word doc resume with everything formatted with spaces. No tabs or tab stops, no tables, no text boxes or breaks, not even returns. Literally hundreds of spaces moving text across the page or down the line. If you're unfamiliar, that's not even good enough to call beginner, let alone expert. And finally, my favorite. She included a picture of herself at a bar, drinking a cocktail with a lot of leg and showing. Not a resume issue, but one person was eliminated before I read her resume. She was hounding us on the phone, and after repeatedly being told not to call again, she showed up at the office demanding to speak with a hiring manager. She didn't realize she was speaking with a hiring manager and was quite rude about it. I took her name down, then informed her I was the hiring manager and could tell her the status of her application. We've decided to go with another candidate. There will be no further need to follow up as my decision on her application is final. She was shocked, angry, and vocal, but I simply told her that we're looking for someone with professional decorum, and that I had a stack of resumes from people who hadn't ignored every instruction or chewed out any of our staff, making them better qualified than her. Story 9. I have several CVs that will never make the cut. Keep them in a non-GDPR-proof binder hidden out of view. I work as an IT recruiter. Normal CV on the job site. Junior profile, 18 years old, just finished school. Pretty normal CV, except at the bottom, he writes that he has a small junk and likes guys. The CV goes back and forth in the office. Eventually, we decided to call him and ask why he put that on the CV. Turns out he had to make the CV for school. Left his PC open and one of his classmates thought it was funny to add that to his profile. A CV with a picture of a man in only his boxers. No headshot, just his abs, boxers, and legs. We did not call the guy. Several CVs with people ranting against the government, religion, or anything else. Obvious proof of mental disabilities. People writing things such as, I will do the time for the crime I may or may not have committed. I haven't called any of them. Cover letters with the wrong company name on it. So many cover letters with the wrong company on it. Recruiters will forget to change your name when sending you an email. Applicants will forget to change the name when applying. We really need to get rid of mandatory cover letters. I'll still call them if their profile is decent. People are open about just putting their CV online so they can keep their unemployment benefits. At least they don't waste my time. Story 10. We used to do this. We would reject a faux pas, then we realized we were chewing through good candidates who didn't have the money to use a professional writing service. If we're hiring for a developmental role, someone we expect needs to grow, then we shouldn't hold them to the standard we would expect after they have developed. We decided to start picking resumes for experience we think we want and ignore minor mistakes or odd formatting choices. We even re-interviewed people who we think just had an off day. Now we have to do this because qualified candidates for our positions are fairly rare, so we have to be a little more flexible. Another one, a few years ago, I bought an already working franchise location in the next town over, which is a very small and quiet town. The previous owner let go of his employee with a severance, so I didn't have to take over her contract. Being my new and only store, I decided to work by myself until getting settled and hire help if I seemed to need it. The first day I opened the store, about an hour after opening, the former employee came by to introduce herself and drop a resume. I told her that I'll consider it since she worked there for about 5 years, mostly on her own. Previous owner was not a hands-on boss, and put it in a drawer. During the rest of the day, I noticed people standing on the sidewalk looking in, and after doing that, they came in and made a purchase. After 4 or 5 people did this, I asked a woman what made her look before coming in, and she said, "Oh, I wouldn't have come in if that red-headed witch was still working here." Needless to say, I put a under new management sign on the door, using the back of the witch's CV, and no one else looked before coming in that day. Story 11. Not a hiring manager, but was reviewing resumes to be forwarded on. It was more about what wasn't there. These were primarily people who were trying to transition from IT to IT security. I saw plenty of resumes stuffed with IT certs and whatnot, but barely any of them took any time to go get qualifications for the field they wanted to work in. You've got to realize you have to get someone to pick you out of all the candidates. You need to show them that you actually have a drive and a passion for it. When I got my first security job, the hiring manager told me that what interested him was that I had a bunch of security certs. That told him this wasn't just any sysadmin applying at whatever. Now, of course, my passion came out in the interview and secured me the job, but to get there, I had to get noticed. My advice, if you're trying to transition, I don't care so much about what you used to do as much as what you can do in the future, and your resume needs to speak to that. Also, someone had in the resume, "I do not complain. I'll do what you ask and I won't complain. I'm willing to work hard and go the extra mile without complaining. I do not like complainers and whiners and I will never be one." They called him immediately. He's been here 6 years now and is easily the most reliable employee we have. He complained one time, though. Another employee accidentally set him on fire and he said he didn't want to work with that guy anymore. That complaint is pretty justifiable in my book. Story 12. I had to hire an LPN at one of my first jobs out of the Navy. Got a resume where this guy sounded like he was a freaking medical machine. Medical units he served with, he was former Army, specific medical procedures he was trained in and had experience performing. Called him up because it lacked one key piece of info. Where and when did he graduate from nursing school and did he have a valid license? Oh no license. He went through a combat lifesaver program in the Army. It was a 3 or 4 day course to serve as a first responder. This guy made it sound like he was a combat medic. And I told him I couldn't hire him as a nurse since he wasn't a nurse. He responded by saying that it was BS that his military experience didn't count and that I should hire him and train him on the job. I told him that was illegal and if he wanted to be a nurse, he needed to attend and graduate from a licensed qualifying nurse program. He told me I was a freaking jerk and then promptly filed a complaint that we didn't hire him solely because he was a veteran. Considering that I actually was a combat medic and had been one only a few months prior, that didn't fly. Also, the main reason we didn't hire him as a nurse was that he wasn't one. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.